This is a Wild Games Production podcast.
Welcome to the D&D world.
Meet you by the art room door, in a circle on the hallway floor. I made up a new map last night. It's got a dragon and a wizard fight.
Yeah, I really feel like there's a kinetic energy that you get from playing a tabletop game that you cannot emulate electronically.
Absolutely. I used to say people, it's about 50% bad jokes and movie references, 30% snacks, 10% other chat, and about 10% gaming gets, done.
Yeah. Maybe we'll fight some monsters, but we're really there. We're really there for the hang.
And the snacks. Always remember the snacks.
But this isn't the Snacks podcast. This is the Save or Die podcast, a podcast about classic Dungeons and Dragons.
Excellent.
I am one of your hosts, Carl.
And I'm your host, Courtney.
Crispy could not be with us tonight. He's doing well, sends his regards, but he was not available. But we do have a special guest, Mr. Darrold Wagner.
Thank you. Daniel Wagner. That's me.
And
Grognards.
Absolutely. We're very excited to have you on this show. For those listening who may not know, Darrold Wagner, one of the things we're going to talk about is the invention of the thief. Darrold Wagner created the thief class for Dungeons and Dragons. So before we get to that, though, I do want to ask about, just because you got into the game so early on, I want to talk a little bit about what that experience was like. What was your introduction to the game like? Had you had experience with other games before? Were you a war gamer, or did you come to it from a different angle? How did you get introduced to Dungeons and Dragons?
Well, we had Friday night games at a gentleman. His name was Thomas Coveney III. And we played Friday night games every night at his house. War games, and some sort of one game that was a kind of a early role-playing game. It was a jousting game, and you'd write down where you're going to aim at, the helmet, the shield, whatever. And the other guy would write down that. There was a matrix to see whether you horse the other guy or not. But in the back, there was some paragraphs how to do your coat of arms and how to do a character. Now, of course, that was all pure background, completely extraneous to the game. But you'd write up the name of your character and his background and stuff like that. So there was some sort of role-playing games even before Dungeons and Dragons. But they were very primitive. And the role-playing was either done, and it was the whole thing, like say back with Dave Arneson, but it wasn't. They had no rules, or they had rules, and the role playing was a little side issue. So that's what happened with Dungeons and Dragons. It brought together role playing with rules, and that's the genius of Gary Gygax. We got one of the very first copies of Dungeons and Dragons. Tom ordered it as soon as he saw it in a magazine. We Xeroxed off, for shame, but that was the only way to do it back in those days because you couldn't buy them. Copies of it. And I had, I believe, the first dungeon on the West Coast. So we started playing Dungeons and Dragons, and we didn't really know what to do. We all had, it's a very rough outline, the original 3-box set. We gave everyone a second level character to start with, because clerics can only cast spells at second level, if you remember correctly.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone got a first level henchman. So you'd have a henchman so we could kill someone instead of killing your character. And we of course did the 3d6 roll in order. And then we looked down at those dice and decide what kind of character you'd be. Oh, you've got a 16 intelligence. You'd make a good wizard, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Rather than the other way around, which is deciding what you want to be and then assigning dice numbers. I had an early dungeon. It's the Tower of Algebra. Terrible.
I love it. It's fantastic. That's a great name.
A wizard who was a great mathematician and astrologer and designed a dungeon, and then it got out of control and he disappeared. And that was the start of the dungeon that I did. And other people, Gary Switzer, Jousting, etc., we got so enamored of this game that we also started to play at Aero Hobbies with Gary Switzer and at Jousting's house. And we'd play all weekend long. I mean, we'd start Friday at 5 o'clock and play till 2 o'clock in the morning. And we'd play Saturday from noon to 2 o'clock in the morning. And then Sunday, we just play.
That'd require a whole lot of snacks.
It did.
Well, I want to have a follow-up question. First, I want to ask, do you remember the name of that jousting game?
No, I do not. You could probably look it up someplace.
Sure. We'll try to track it down just so we can have it in our show notes and let people kind of look into it. Sounds very interesting. And then I love algebra. I think that's fantastic. You may say it, but I use a lot of name puns, so I'm not necessarily the best judge for what's acceptable puns or not. But yeah, I love it. And I love the idea of like mathematician wizards. I kind of think of like magic as the math of the universe, and so wizards have keyed into that. Awesome.
So, Darrold, can you tell us about the invention of the thief, how it came to be?
Yes. We were playing Dungeons and Dragons, and one of the persons, he had a wizard. And the wizard, had a low strength, as wizards often do. And he had a dwarf henchman who also had a low strength, but a high dexterity. And so he was going on more or less a solo game. And he was frustrated because in original Dungeons and Dragons, you need a certain amount of strength in order to bash open doors and smash locks and stuff. And he could not do it. So he asked me, his name was Andy, and he was a lawyer, oddly enough, or he's in law school. And he asked me, well, my dwarf has a really high dexterity. 16 in those days was very high. Can he try to pick the lock with his dagger? I said, sure, why not? That's how you played early Dungeons and Dragons, and that's how all good dungeon masters do it. Sure, why not? Let's make a die roll. And he made a good die roll, and he picked the lock. Well, I saw right immediately that this was a needed class, and I drew up 3 levels of the class, more or less for use for henchmen, for NPCs. But then everyone was going, wow, the Grey Mouser, Kugel the Clever, Bilbo, we want to play thieves. And so I fleshed it out and did more levels. And it became a very popular thing to play in our games, which we called the universe of Aurania, because gold was so common. This was just like one page, and I kind of scribbled it down. The class fought like a cleric, had saving throws kind of like a cleric, so that was good saving throws. But it had spells like a wizard, but those weren't spells. They're called abilities. And he had a list of first-level abilities, things like pick locks, disarm traps. Now, if he chose as his first-level ability, pick locks, like a wizard would pick magic missile, a thief could then pick locks. Now, not just once, but all day long, because it was ability, not a spell. So he could pick locks. And then when he leveled up, he could pick another ability, and so forth, and so forth, and so forth. Pick open magical locks at, I think, 3rd level and onward. And this was very popular, and we all played one of these, and everyone had one. Then Gary Switzer called Gary Gygax long distance, which in those days was a big deal. Oh, it's da, da, da. And told him about this class and sent him a Xerox copy of my sheet. Gygax took that. He did a proto version of it using my system in a newsletter. But then I guess he didn't like the system, so he rewrote it with percentile dice for skills and put that in Greyhawk. And there you have the genesis of the thief class from a dwarf henchman who would not have enough strength to open the door to the thief class in Greyhawk.
That is.
Came from a dwarf.
Courtney really likes dwarves.
Well, and I was thinking, when I was thinking of the question, I was like, well, I wonder how it came about. I was like, I bet it was a dwarf, but I did not think about having a low strength, though. But I was just like, kind of that progression seemed more natural. I don't know why. Probably just because I like dwarves.
In OD&D, dwarves make some of the best thieves. Dwarves and halflings, originally hobbits, but then halflings, made the best thieves because they had all these bonuses to their skills. So they were by far the best. And since there's no level limit on their progression, especially for hobbits, it became the class of choice for hobbits and halflings. You could get as high level as you wanted.
That's very interesting. I had a question about your thoughts on in later versions of basic D&D, they made everything race as class, where the thief was always a human. There weren't dwarven thieves or halfling thieves. And I was wondering what your thoughts were on that, but seeing as it came from dwarves, it seems like you would be not for it.
We never played the basic set. Mm-hmm. We did play with, I can't remember his name now, Eric.
John Eric Holmes?
Yes.
That
we played him a little bit. He had a character named Eric the Cleric.
That's fantastic.
He wasn't a regular. We just played with a couple times, and he went off and did his own thing, which was basically he was a teacher, and he made basic D&D understandable to non-gamers. We went directly from OD&D to AD&D, first edition. We never bothered with the basic set or any of that stuff. But yes, in OD&D, they did have Elf was a class for a while. It was type of magic user thing, but yeah, you could just play. You would play a halfling who was a thief or a human or a dwarf. Elves did not make very good thieves, actually, oddly enough. They had some good bonuses, but they weren't the best.
Were there any of those abilities that you had mentioned that did not ever make it into the publication of Greyhawk? Were there some abilities you can remember your thief class having that never showed up? You know, we see open locks, remove traps, pickpockets, all of those kind of carry over. But were there any that you had that just never showed up?
I don't think so. I think he took all of them. He took all the abilities and translated them to percentile dice. That was Gary's big thing. Remember what Gary did is Gary took Dave Arneson's stuff, which was, I played with Dave Arneson once at one game. Dave Arneson was he had a few hastily written down charts. He didn't believe in rules per se. And what Gary's skill was taking other people's vague, nebulous ideas and turning them into sets of rules that work. I mean, even OD&D still works, even though it's not as polished as, AD&D, obviously.
All right. Yeah. And yeah, everything's informed a little bit by the thing that comes before it.
Right.
So have you ever heard of this kind of resistance to the thief class? There are some people who feel like before the thief class, or without a thief in the party, then anybody can kind of look for traps or pick locks. What are your feelings on this kind of resistance to having a thief in the rules to allow those abilities to just go to whatever character class?
Oh, I was there, and no,
Sure.
you could not.
Right.
Pick a lock. That's period. There was no possibility at all in the rules of picking a lock. Now, sometimes the dungeon masters have a trap, and you could kind of say how you would disarm it if he allowed you to spot it because you had a dwarf who could spot traps or something. But then again, it wasn't a character class ability. It was you as a person describing how, okay, so I am going to get across this pit trap by taking some iron spikes and driving them to the wall. But there's no rule for that. That's just what you said you would do.
Mm-hmm.
And that works sometimes with some traps, absolutely. But back in those days, the dungeons were full of devious, deadly Gygaxian traps. Not traps like they have nowadays where, oh, gosh darn, I take blank D6 of dice damage. I'll just take it. And then the cleric will heal me and on. No, I mean, they would do things like strip you naked and send you into a pit, and then all your stuff goes into another pit or whatever. So they were just barreling through the traps didn't work. That would be disaster. So yeah, some traps could be done but then is that role playing? Because that's yourself as a person thinking now how to get past this trap. So you could have Thog, the Int 6 barbarian, describing this intricate way of getting past the trap. That's not role playing. That's playing a puzzle room, and you're playing yourself. So back in those days, and also you could bash open doors. A lot of doors could be bashed open, and that was what failed them because you didn't know how to bash open doors. But then if you bashed a chest, you would break the potions, destroy other things in there, set up traps that would destroy all the good loot, whatever. So the thief was a necessary part of dungeon crawling. Now, of course, you don't really need a thief anymore. Every class can open locks or disable device. The thief or the rogue now is best at it, but every class can do it.
Well, that is definitely something we want to talk about. It's actually our next question on our list. I did want to mention before we move on to that, just how much I love the fact that it was something so simple as a locked door, a blocked, a way to get through. You see that closed door, and you came up with a solution, and it was so mechanics driven. Because in my mind, I'd always kind of wondered if it were like, and I think the response to it was this way, but I kind of always imagined someone was just like, you know what, thieves are in fantasy literature, we should have a thief class. I kind of assumed that was it, and the fact that it was just done through play, I love that. I love that it was just discovered.
I believe it was a chest on a door, but same thing, yes.
Right.
So yeah, it was done because the class was necessary. And to give Gygax total credit, he immediately recognized it as something the game was lacking, the big four, and immediately put it into the game within a short time after hearing about it. So, Gygax recognized a good thing when he saw it.
So how do you feel about the way the class is presented now, with the name Rogue and the way it plays in more modern versions of D&D? How do you feel that the class has evolved over time?
Well, it's no longer necessary. You no longer have, okay, well, who's going to be the healer? Who's going to be the magic user? Who's going to be the tank? And who's going to be the trap remover? Because traps aren't as deadly, and everyone can. A ranger, for example, can get you by a number of traps. Other classes can do it too, but still, the rogue remains one of the most popular classes to play. Even though they have neutered it by allowing other classes to do what it does. And see, that's the thing I thought was wrong. Okay, it's like saying, well, look, why can't every class cast Fireball? I mean, it's saying, why can't every class pick a lock? Why can't every class cast Fireball? See, so that neutered the class to some extent. And the lack of those devious Gygaxian traps, just simply a D6 of damage or whatever, or poison or whatever, something easily healable, that also neutered the class. But the rogue today is still a very fun class and one of the most popular. So they neutered it as a necessary part of the party, but they didn't get rid of the fun.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I think people think of that in modern D&D as a feature, that any class can do anything and that there isn't a strong archetypical structure. And I vastly prefer the archetypical structure of old school D&D, where you kind of sought out these different components to form a perfect team to go into the dungeon. And everybody has their own job.
Right. And I have no problem when you have like 20 classes that some other of the classes, assassin, bard, whatever, couldn't be adequate as thieves, not as good as the original, but can be adequate. That's fine. Just like some other classes, like the bard, can cast spells. Some other classes, like the paladin, can do some healing. That's fine. I mean, but it shouldn't be everyone be able to do it, because if you have 20 classes, it should be a quarter of them should be able to cast arcane spells, a quarter cast healing spells, and a quarter of them should be able to blocks and pick traps. And the other ones, no. It should be a special ability, make them more special.
So speaking of that, I want to go back to thieves and the use of special abilities in your original concept. Do you remember the mechanics of how that die roll was made? I know you said Gygax changed it to percentile dice, so I assumed it wasn't percentile dice. Do you know what it was?
No die roll at all. If you had pick locks, well, we first of all, we pick locks. Then there was pick simple locks, pick complex locks, pick and magical locks. 3 levels. You just simply could do it. That's it. See. No roll. There was a dungeon lock. You had that class ability. Just like, what's the roll required to do magic missile? You have to roll to cast magic missile? No. You have to roll. So it sped up the game a lot too. Now, the dungeon master could say, "Oh well, you've lost your thieves' tools because it happened. Thereby, you have to make the die roll to do it, or you have to improvise some tools or something." Sure, because we always could pull these things out, of our butts. It require a die roll, under your decks to do it then. But in general, there's no die roll. You just like. There's no die roll to turn invisible. There's no die roll to cast Cure Light Wounds. It just did.
When you were playing and your friend got to the chest and he decided that he was a dwarf and he decided he wanted to try and pick the lock, did you make him roll under his decks or?
Yes. I just decided to roll under his decks.
That was just good DMing.
right? He's just this dwarf henchman who had a halberd and a dagger, and we gave all the dwarf henchmen halberds for some reason. I can't remember why, but we did. And so he came up and didn't want to smash the chest on him because he suspected potions and stuff. So we had the dwarf pick the lock, and I let him do it.
You let him try.
Yeah. And after that, we did say, and it did say that, pick locks, pick simple locks. It was assumed you had a set of lock picks, and you weren't, your decks hadn't all been strained to 0 or stuff like that, but assumed normal stuff.
So is there a character in literature that you feel captures the ideal of what you picture as a thief class character, or is it not as constrained to literature for you as that is?
Well, Kugel the Clever and the Gray Mouse are probably the best archetypes. Obviously, Bilbo wasn't really a burglar. Although he certainly had, being a hobbit, had certain burglar-like abilities. So those are the two archetypes. There's several others, of course. Early Conan, became a thief for a while. Multi-classed. Barbarian, then thief, then knight, So that's what we were thinking of, the adventures of Conan as a thief. Those sort of archetypes, and Fafhrd the Grey Mouser, and we even had a almost all thieves game in Lankhmar. So that was cool too. I had the idea that City of Thieves shared adventure book came out of that idea, perhaps.
Well, is there anything else you want to cover on thieves before we move on?
No. Oh, well, yes. I have given Jared, otherwise known as Illusionist Investment Group, the rights to the original Thief, and I rewrote the original Thief for Pathfinder 3.5, 5th edition type thing, and with the abilities as opposed to die rolls. And apparently that will be showing up someday from his company.
Very interesting. And at this time, would you like to talk about the Manual of Aurania and your... am I saying that right?
Yes, you are saying it right.
Awesome.
You pronounced it correctly. The last guy didn't pronounce it correctly. Manual of Aurania, yes.
Do you want to talk anything about that while we have you?
Sure. The Manual of Aurania came apart because, we'd written some stuff up for one of the Alarms and Excursions and published it, and people really liked some of our stuff. And of course, then we saw the thief class had been stolen by Gary Gygax. Although Gary Switzer did not tell us of his involvement there. I think he was afraid I'd be angry at him. So we decided to make a Greyhawk, basically, and we took our monsters and our classes and made a couple other new ones up just for that book, and wrote it up and Xeroxed it off. I had free use of a Xerox machine as I was a security guard at a company that had one of those big old Xerox machines, and they said, "Oh, sure, go ahead and use the machine." They didn't, I think, imagine that I was going to make 300 copies of a 40-page book, but they just said, go ahead. So we Xeroxed off 300 copies of it, and it sold like hotcakes. It's mostly stuff that I wrote most of it. Hugh Singh edited it, and he came up with a couple of the classes. The Samurai, the Bjorn the Shapeshifter is his. And Larry Steele typed it up, complete with typos, and submitted a couple of monsters too. Amy and Troy did the illustrations, and Troy is now a famous artist. Troy Locker Palmer, and she's now a famous artist. Isn't that cool?
That's awesome.
And so it became so popular. The Warhouse and another distributor said, "Well, we want more." So we had Larry retype it, just to get rid of most of the typos, and put in some nice illustrations, and actually had a professional copier printer print us off. I think it was 1,000, but it could have been 1,500 copies, and those also sold. We were guest of honors, I think, at GundraCon 3, and a few other things. It was quite popular back in those days. It was the very first third-party supplement for Dungeons & Dragons. And now it's kind of legendary, as there's only the 1,500 copies or so, and that's all there is, so it's very hard to get all of a copy. And I've been told I sold the rights to, again, Illusionist Investment, and they're supposedly redoing the art and coming out with a new version of it with new art and old art, and that'll be soon available.
Very cool. Well, we'll definitely keep our listeners updated on that.
Now, want to hear a fun thing? We had done the Lyre of Aurania, the sequel, and then we kind of squabbling over it because Hugh said this has just got too many typos, and but the art was gorgeous in my mind. And recently, Troy found the copy of it, the original working version. I sent that off to Illusions Expression group too, and hey, this will be great too.
Awesome.
No one's seen that. Just a very few people have seen that.
That's really cool. So there's a unknown, unseen expansion for OD&D that may be making its way to the market soon.
I believe the Librum and the Manual will be Kickstarters. The Manual of Aurania first, and then the Librum. And so send your emails and thoughts and PMs to Illusionist Expression Group and whatnot, and let's get this thing out there, because I'm sure lots of people will love to see it. And especially for now, it's the in thing to do OD&D campaigns. And if you're going to do an OD&D campaign, ours is pretty much the only supplement. So cool, you can have an OD&D supplement along with your OD&D campaign.
All right, and we should be able to get that information in the show notes, the Illusionist, and where to reach them if you want to bang on their door and say, get to work, let's get this out there. We'll certainly figure out how to get you at their doorstep. So, Darrold, thank you so much for being on the show. Is there anything else you want to speak towards before we wrap up?
Yes, I do want to mention that soon there'll be a movie out by Pat Kilbane called The Dreams in Gary's Basement, and I will be featured in that movie. Probably not a major feature, but will be in that movie. So that will be very cool when that finally comes out.
There are no small parts, even in documentaries.
This will be a small part.
Well, I still look forward to it. I'm glad to hear he was able to talk to you and get you in that, and I'm excited to see it.
Yeah, he was so excited. He was just. I showed him the original dungeon, the Algebra, and he was just turning the pages reverently, going, This dates from the original D&D back in the old days. This is like finding a lost scroll or something. I'm going, yeah. That was very cool.
Yeah, I got the same problem he does.
And until COVID hit, I was running my Friday night gaming group through that dungeon. So they got to play in the first dungeon on the West Coast.
Will the Dungeon of Algarol be published?
Actually, no one has asked for that to be published. That would be a very interesting thing to. It's really not legible, except to me with my very bad handwriting. But I could probably get somebody, work with an artist and someone to actually publish the dungeon. That would be a very interesting thing to do. I never thought of that. I didn't think anyone would be interested, to be honest with you.
Well, I think there'd be a lot of people interested. And I know one person right here talking to you that's very interested in seeing and running the Dungeon of Algebra. I'm a stay-at-home homeschool dad. I have 2 kids, and I use D&D to help them with their math skills. So the Dungeon of Algebra sounds right up my alley.
I pronounced it slightly differently just to get people, to have people think about it. I said algebra, but yeah, they got it after.
Algebra. I got to get that right pronunciation. I understand.
Just so it wasn't too obvious.
You don't want to get a cease and desist from the big algebra lawyers.
Yes, right.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Darrold, for being here, and it was great having you. What a cool rundown of early D&D and the invention of the thief. This was very cool for me. I love hearing stories of old school D&D, especially very, very early D&D, and it was very interesting to hear how that was created.
Anytime.
All right. Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Okay. Thanks a lot, and stay safe. Stay cool.
You too.
Thanks.
Well, thanks again to Darrold Wagner for being with us. We do have a couple of emails, or actually one email and one Facebook message, but I think we're going to go ahead and read both of those now.
All right, here we go. Hey, Courtney, Carl, and Crispy. Have you guys heard of Robert Warbaugh and his campaign that started in Canada 38 years ago? You may have heard this show as it's been out for a while, but I listened to it a few weeks ago and loved the old school D&D vibe.
And then he links. He's sending us a link to the episode that Robert Warbaugh was on of the Dragon Talk podcast, which is the official D&D podcast for 5th edition D&D. And every once in a while, they'll do something that's a little bit more old school focused. And this is one of those episodes.
And he says, thanks for your show, Toby from Australia. That is super awesome that you're from Australia. P.S. First played Redbox Basic in 1984 at the end of... P.S. First played Redbox Basic in 1984 at the age of 12. So your podcast helps me history check into my nostalgia for that era of play. Thank you. You're welcome.
Courtney really wants to go to Australia.
I really do.
So
be a kangaroo.
I had heard of Robert Warbaugh before this email, and I'd seen there was a couple of videos from different places, and I don't even remember where the places were from, but I saw 2 videos where he talked about his 38-year-long campaign, which is astounding in and of itself. Primarily, what it looks to me is that he's using a modified 2nd edition AD&D for those campaigns. So it was really cool to get the real kind of long take podcast form story about it from the Dragon Talk podcast. And it's always cool when any like 5th edition modern D&D medium takes a look at old school D&D, because it's always just nice to take a look back. And it's obviously the content I'm interested in as someone who plays old school D&D primarily. We should start a campaign and play for 38 years, Courtney.
Like one campaign?
Yeah, like just go for 38 years, same world, Say not stop playing at level 5 like every other time. Like let's be level 20 and you know fight Thor. Fight Thor for his hammer.
We'll have to take notes. I can't remember what happens the session before on a level 5 character. Whatever. It's a problem. Possibly diagnosable. Who knows? All right. For our Facebook message, we wanted to read to you guys today. Long story, but I'll keep it short. I've played D&D on and off since the late 70s, but I'm new to listening to podcasts. From a D&D Facebook page, I learned of a new podcast, This Old Dungeon. I started listening, but being new, they've only put out a few episodes. I asked them for recommendations on other D&D podcasts I could listen to, and they referred me to you guys. Awesome, thanks. As I mentioned before, I started listening to you at the beginning. I'm up to Adventure 55. I recently thanked them for sending me your way, and they read my note on air and had a lot of nice things to say about you guys. Aww. You might want to check out the good review in episode 4. Thanks for providing me hours of reminiscing. Hopefully I'll be hearing from you. DM Carl, right? Soon.
That message came from Jonathan Kurtz. Thank you so much for listening, Jonathan. Unfortunately, you still have quite a ways to get to this message, this episode.
Feel free to go ahead and jump to episode 149 where Courtney comes in. Courtney Fan Club. Coming at you.
He's not gonna hear this. He's going in order.
I mean, he'll eventually hear it.
But I do want to.
Surprised.
So I do want to mention. I wanted to read this because I wanted to talk a little bit about This Old Dungeon, which I wasn't aware of. I somehow missed that this existed. But this is from Save or Die listener Luau Lu, who's written in a couple of times and just is a really cool guy and has a podcast. And I've not even heard this one with the nice review of Save or Die on it. For all I know, he says don't like the new hosts. I think he likes us okay. But so I just wanted to mention it and give Luau Lu a shout out because he's been really supportive of Save or Die, and I'm gonna check out his podcast.
Definitely. I like the title. I mean, if nothing else, that's pretty solid.
Yeah, This Old Dungeon. The Bob Vila-esque logo and everything. Fantastic. All right. Well, I think that's going to be it for this episode of Save or Die. And I don't know that we'll have an actual play at the end of this episode because Crispy isn't here and we don't have one recorded. So there might be an actual play after the credits. There might not. Who knows what's going to happen? You could stick around for these messages and see if there's an actual play segment. There may be. There may not be. We may get together and record it separately. We may not. I don't know what's going to happen. Guys, I'm scared, but we'll get through this together.
Peace out, Cub Scout.
So, you like AD&D 2nd Edition but no podcast to listen to?
Guess what?
We got the cure right here.
I got a fever. And the only prescription is
The Thaco's Hammer Podcast.
You want me to put the hammer down?
Join DMs Glenn, Brian, Corey, and Full On Gamer as they discuss, debate, and review the world of 2nd Edition AD.
Yes.
Go here.
Give me a gin.
Yeah, that's DM Corey ordering drinks.
Sorry, girlfriend's getting gin.
Rules, modules, supplements, clones, everything 2E is fair game.
Someone lied to you, and there's an opposed roll, and, oh, they won, so you believe the lie. I know, but I don't because I, the player, know that they lied to me. But you, the character, have to act like you take the lie.
So listen into a podcast where number 2 is number 1. The Thaco's Hammer Podcast, the best damn 2nd Edition AD&D podcast ever. You'll find it on iTunes or at thacoshammer.info.
Are you enjoying the show you're listening to right now? Great! Why not head over to patreon.com/WGP and support that show for as little as $1 a month. $1 a month goes a long way to helping support the network of Wild Games Productions. Again, that's patreon.com/WGP. Thank you.
Hilda and Leothward and the Red Shields and the ghost of Jan are returning to Jan's small home. As they approach the home, in the distance they see a bald man looking around the perimeter of the building. This gentleman is dressed in chain mail armor and has a jeweled belt around his waist. He has his hand resting on the hilt of a sword that hangs from his jeweled belt. He is looking around the outside of Jan's house. You're still safely away from him. You're still he just came into your field of vision, but he could see you just as easily as you're seeing him. He does not seem to have seen you yet.
Is there anything I can duck behind?
There's like an alleyway probably that you could probably get between you and him.
Okay. I'm gonna like, what's the fantasy equivalent of Cheez-It? It's the fuzz to the party. Like, I'm gonna try to get everyone to duck into the alley with me.
I believe it's Curtis. It's the straw.
So yeah, I wanna have us like hide before he can see us.
Okay, so you're saying let's get out of here, get behind the alleyway. Hilda, what are you doing?
I mean, I duck too.
Okay.
Go with him. As quietly as I can.
All right. You all kind of hide and get out of view.
Well, I want to ask Jan if he recognizes this person.
No, he does not look familiar. I do not know who he is.
Okay, so it's not like his brother.
No.
Can we see
his
what
brother
type of emblem he has?
Now, not why. It's Jan. What's Jan backwards?
Noi? I guess Noi?
I guess.
All right. Eventually, as he's looking around the perimeter of the building, he looks around, sees that nobody's watching, and he breaks into the house.
Oh, Nikes! I almost did a swear. All right, let's. And we can observe him doing that.
Mm-hmm.
Do we see what kind of emblem he had on? Or...
There's no emblem. There's no like guild sigil or anything like that he's wearing.
Jan, did you owe anyone a large sum of money?
You, I think, kind of, maybe the only person.
Did we ever get into Jan's house? I feel like we did.
You did. I think you actually
something
broke in. I think you broke in to get in, but you may have just picked the lock. But
I can't remember. Sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sure the person who's binging this right now, who's just listened to the last episode, is like, no, you did this, you idiots.
It's possible.
I think we should go pay a visit to our good friend Jan at his home address.
Does he seem in military, like, uniform, or just in nice clothing?
No, he doesn't look like a city guard or anything like that, or a soldier or anything. He looks like a sellsword or a mercenary before anything else. He is in nice clothing, but no, you don't get the impression that he is on any type of official business or anything like that. And he's not in any type of a uniform that would denote a soldier or a guard of this city.
Okay.
So you're standing outside Jan's house. You're in an alleyway. You've seen this guy break into the house, and he's in there now.
I think we should get the drop on him.
Jan, is there only one way in and out of your house?
Yes, just that door. It's the only way in.
Well, good. Let's go see who's checking it out. Do we just want to walk right up in there?
Yes? I mean, we walk up to the house, but, like, I don't know, maybe we, like, position ourselves so we can, like, file in and surround him.
Well, you have Eric, Cooper, and Brother Bowen with you that can help in the fight. And then the two of you.
What if we go in and have Eric, Cooper, and Brother Ben? Who? Brother who?
Brother Bowen.
Brother Bowen. Kind kind of hang out by the entrance to keep an eye on the outside of things and to not make it quite 5-on-1.
Yeah, we can watch our backs, and we'll take them 2-on-1.
Yeah, but within earshot. I mean, I don't think Jan's house is gigantic.
No, it's a small house.
So they can just listen for trouble on the inside.
Okay.
So just the two of you are going in?
I think so, yeah.
I mean, we're just, going right inside the door to talk to this guy.
Okay. So are you walking in, sneaking in?
Well, like, it hasn't been that long since Jan died. That sounds so callous. I know he's not real or whatever, but, like, you know. So, like, I imagine that the news of his demise is not widespread.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we could probably fake it and be like, that we're visiting Jan.
I see.
Oh, what are you, be like, what are you doing in our good friend Jan's home, stranger?
Okay. So you walk in as if you're
before we do.
Okay.
Jan, I need you to be as quiet as you can, and also invisible.
I think that's how I am all the time, unless it's you.
Oh, yeah, because yeah, you're right. Never mind. I'm an idiot. I forgot about that. I forgot about the rules of Ghost Jan. All right, then. Never mind. Yeah, let's go in.
Okay, so Jan and you two go into the building. And Cooper, Brother Bowen, and Eric stay outside to keep watch, make sure nothing else goes down. But still in earshot of you as Group A and their Group B. And you walk into the building, and this guy, this bald warrior, has torn the place apart, clearly looking for something. And as soon as you walk in, he starts, and he draws his sword.
Hello there.
His eyes dart back and forth between Hilda and Leothward, and he says, "Hello? What are you doing here?"
Paying a visit to our good friend Jan.
What are you doing here? Are you a friend of Jan's?
Yes. Jan is my friend. But I guess he's not here. So I guess we should all go.
Was it like this when you got here?
Yes, that's very suspicious.
That seems very unlike Jan. If anything, I would describe my good friend Jan as being exceptionally tidy.
It should be worrisome, so maybe we should all leave.
Also, if you know anything about Jan, you know he has a pathological fear of bald men. Drop your charade, sir!
Well, I do think we should all be leaving now, since Jan is not here.
Oh.
And this is his house.
What are you doing here?
Just paying a visit. So I'll be going now, like you, right? Since none of us...
No one is going anywhere.
If Jan is your friend, what's his last name? Oh wait, you must say his given name? Family name?
Yeah, last name's fine. This isn't whatever. We're not the Royal Shakespeare Company or anything. He goes, John.
I look at Jan's ghost and give like a, is that correct? Is that real?
I say, Jan? And I turn and look.
No, it's not my name. It's just Jan. I do not have a family name.
If you were a friend of Jan, you'd know he doesn't have a family name.
So tell us, what is your business here?
Aside from being very bad at lying.
Okay, he attacks. I was trying to decide, like, he's backed in a corner. He's got to get out. He's not the sharpest tool in the shed. He was looking kind of dumb with his finger and his thumb, all that kind of stuff. So that's where we're going to stop on this episode of Save or Die. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next episode.
The Save or Die podcast is a production of Wild Games Production, and it's produced for entertainment purposes only. The music used in the intro and outro is by Tripod and used with permission. Be sure to visit the Save or Die crew at saveordie.info for more information. If you'd like to support this podcast, please go to patreon.com/WGP.